Thank you very much. My thanks to the Academy for this honor, and to Leonard and Aaron.
In the hush of that studio kitchen, every breath felt amplified. The hot lights bore down, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. A table stood between two actors, forever ordinary, yet in that moment pregnant with possibility. Sada Thompson, cast as Kate Lawrence in the pilot episode of Family, stood opposite her on-screen husband, a stoic presence in workman's clothes. The script called for a simple exchange about supper, a routine scene to ease the viewer into their domestic life. But when the director called, action, something raw and unpredictable took shape. Sada's hand shot out to slam a dish against the countertop. Glass shattered. Silverware clattered. Her eyes glistened, not with practiced tears, but with real anguish that hissed through her voice. The co-star froze. The crew froze. In that single take, the line between scripted artifice and actual heartbreak vanished entirely. No one dared call cut. It wasn't a fluke. It was the culmination of a lifetime spent mining truth from pain. Sada had carried personal scars, emotional wounds both hidden and exposed, into every role she played. As that 6-minute scene unfolded, it felt like witnessing a real family implode. And when the final frame faded, the studio remained silent, suffused with awe. Decades later, the clip would resurface on TikTok, racking up over 15 million views and surprising a generation that barely remembered the black and white television era. Acting coaches hailed it as both masterpiece and warning shot, proof that unguarded authenticity can elevate art but exact a psychological toll. This is the story of how a single performance transformed Sada Thompson's career and reshaped acting lore forever. It is a journey that begins in the dust of Depression-era Iowa, winds through the gender-biased corridors of mid-century theater programs, and arcs toward the bright glare of Emmy stages and late-night studio lots. We will trace the moments that forged her resilience, the family rift that cost her inheritance, the on-set accident that nearly ended her life, the battles with blacklists and loyalty oaths, and the moral stands that won her both applause and ire. We will witness how Kate Lawrence's outburst on Family served as a lightning rod, drawing together her personal history and professional craft in one unforgettable spin of drama. Imagine a childhood kitchen, a young girl watching her father turn the pages of Turkey World magazine in a drafty Iowa home, her mother stitching together scraps of fabric to patch holes in their only coat. Money was scarce. Dreams were more so. Yet even amid scarcity, the Thompsons made space for art. They loaded their daughter and row upon row of ticket stubs into a battered sedan and drove to Fanwood, New Jersey, so Sada could see plays bound for Broadway. The glittering stages she glimpsed through the curtains would become both beacon and battleground. She began performing in school plays before the age of 10, her classmates drawn to the depth she brought to every scene. By graduation, her talent was undeniable. Even if every professor she encountered tried to confine her to secondary roles, deeming her too masculine or too plain for real romance. Rejecting those narrow confines, she enrolled at Carnegie Institute of Technology. The male-dominated faculty advised her to teach elementary students instead of chasing a fickle career. Undeterred, Sada honed her craft, navigating contemptuous professors, gender biases, and an academic system that graded women more harshly than men. She graduated with honors, albeit under pressure. Her father had arranged a comfortable teaching job back home, only for her to reject it on principle. The fallout was brutal. Her family burned photographs, severed ties, and spread rumors of her demise. For 7 years, she was exiled from her childhood memories, living paycheck to paycheck in summer stock and off-Broadway companies. Yet every struggle honed her emotional honesty. When an 18-hour rehearsal at Ogunquit Playhouse in Maine collapsed her lung, Sada emerged with a scar and a contract for new safety laws. When she was dismissed from South Pacific in 30 seconds, she burned that pain into the furnace of her determination. Each setback was a lesson in resourcefulness. Pawning heirlooms to afford subway fare, nursing a collapsed lung back to health, enduring harassment and loyalty oaths to remain true to her convictions. By 1972, her performance in Twigs marked a triumphant turn. Playing 4 characters in one evening, she won a Tony Award and proved that complexity and authenticity could shatter the stereotypes she once bore. And so we arrive at Family, a television landscape dominated by canned laughter and idyllic sitcoms, suddenly faced an on-screen matriarch who refused to be placid. In that kitchen pilot, Sada channeled decades of turmoil, poverty, discrimination, broken bonds, fractured health, into a 6-minute crescendo that resonated with millions. It was more than acting, it was life unspooled in real time. So what happened next isn't just television history. It is a lesson in the power and peril of unfiltered emotion. An artifact reminding us that the most compelling performances often exact the greatest personal cost. Join me as we dissect every beat of that take, uncover the hidden forces that molded Sada Thompson, and explore why this moment still silences viewers today. In the summer of 1951, Sada arrived at Ogunquit Playhouse armed with nothing but determination and a suitcase full of unsettled debts. The theater's backlot smelled of aging wood and saltwater haze, and the rehearsal schedule read like a sprint. 18-hour days under hot lights that left her hair damp and skin raw. One evening, midway through a late night run of The Seagull, a sharp pain ripped through her chest. She collapsed in a heap of tutus and stage props, her cough cracking the hush of the empty auditorium. Doctors discovered a spontaneous lung collapse, the kind of injury that could end a young actor's career before it even began. Surgery left her with a 12-inch scar and 6 weeks of forced inactivity. Instead of forcing her into retirement, that scar became a badge of resilience, one she wore into every subsequent audition and performance. By spring of 1952, Sada was on the road to Broadway. The stakes higher, the rejection sharper. Her first stop an audition for South Pacific, the year's most anticipated musical. Nearly 3,000 hopefuls crowded the stage door, each clutching sheet music and elaborate hopes. Sada stepped forward, Midwest accent still clinging to her vowels, and gave 30 seconds of a farm girl's lament. The director's eyes glazed over, and his assistant muttered that her look was all wrong for an island romance. Unbeknownst to her at the time, the role had already been promised to a more conventionally glamorous contender. She left with hollow pockets and a determination etched deeper than any trial before. To stay afloat, she joined a touring company in 1953 for a production of Dylan Thomas's Under Milkwood. She earned $50 a week, barely enough to pay for the bus rides between towns, let alone meals. Rehearsals lasted from dawn till well past dusk, often forcing cast members to repair costumes and build sets with their own hands. The director, a man of brittle ego, singled out female actors for humiliation. One night, he cornered her in the dim backstage wings, demanding an apology for supposed insolence. When she refused, her role was cut by half. So she wrote letters to professors to no avail, and endured each setback with a quiet rage that fanned the embers of her ambition into a roaring fire. In 1955, Sada tackled Arthur Miller's The Crucible at the Barter Theater in Virginia. Her critique of McCarthyism, delivered in hushed rehearsal tones, was overheard by a reporter, and the next morning, she was labeled a subversive Red sympathizer. Threatening calls flooded the theater, and the House Un-American Activities Committee pounced on her name. She signed loyalty oaths, paid $300 in legal fees, and watched 3 promising auditions evaporate behind her. Yet even the blacklisting couldn't strip her of the fire in her voice or the steel in her spine. Instead, it morphed into another layer of her craft, a performance tempered by defiance and real-life stakes. By 1956, New York beckoned with bright lights and brutal competition. She rented a 4th-floor walk, up with no heat, rats skittering between floorboards and roaches aplenty. Monthly rent ate into her survival budget, and soup kitchens became her occasional respite. When Revlon offered $200 for a modeling gig, she declined, fearing it would tether her to a surface identity and steal her focus from the stage. Instead, she pawned her grandmother's ring for $15, her last line of credit on a dream, and once fainted mid-audition for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, stomach empty and spirit refusing to surrender. Proving her tenacity, Sada landed a role in The Misanthrope off-Broadway in 1957. Her co-star, Ellis Rabb, smashed a mirror in a jealous rage, leaving her with a cut that needed 6 stitches. Despite the chaos, daily director meetings to stanch the bitter infighting, her performance earned a Drama Desk Award. Rabb, however, made sure she was shunned by his circle, blacklisting her from that community in retribution. Undeterred, she began forging alliances elsewhere, collecting small triumphs that cemented her growing reputation for professionalism under pressure. Financial peril stalked her again in 1959 when investors pulled $15,000 from the effect of gamma rays 2 weeks before opening. With her own mortgage standing as collateral, she borrowed $2,000 to buy costumes and maintain the production. The show closed after 47 performances, leaving her $3,500 in debt. Yet she refused to bow out. She cleaned offices at night, took on 8 show weeks, and collapsed twice from pure exhaustion. Paranormal calls summoned paramedics, but each rescue only recharged her resolve. The rumor mill branded her unlucky. She called herself unbreakable. Then, in 1961, destiny intervened in the form of Paddywhack, a Broadway drama about Irish immigrants. Nearly 3,000 hopefuls auditioned, but Sada's authenticity in embodying a queen's accent and poverty-worn spirit captivated critics. The New York Times' Brooks Atkinson lauded her as devastatingly authentic. Yet, when the play closed after 12 lukewarm shows, its aching realism too bleak for post-war optimism, Sada felt the sting of heartbreak. She wept that night, the memory of poverty and familial exile fusing into a pain so real it fueled her next ascension. By 1964, Sada transformed heartbreak into triumph in Twigs, playing 3 sisters and their mother, a feat unprecedented on Broadway. She layered each character with distinct motivations, voices, and gestures until they felt like separate souls inhabiting a single frame. When the final curtain fell, she stood alone on stage, holding a Tony Award aloft. She became the third woman ever to earn that honor, playing multiple roles in one night. The applause thundered. But it wasn't just for her chameleon artistry. It was a salute to every challenge she had conquered, every dismissal she had outlasted, and every act of integrity she had embraced along the way. By the mid-1970s, the network was abuzz with talk of a new kind of family drama, one that would toss out sitcom formulas and trade canned laughter for unvarnished emotion. After years of steady stage work, Sada Thompson found herself courted by television producers eager to harness her reputation for authenticity. She had appeared in one-off dramas on Camera 3 in 1961 and The Nurses in 1963, but those roles felt like small windows into her skill. She guest-starred on Marcus Welby, MD, delivering a performance so raw that one producer called it uncanny. Word spread that here was an actress who mined real life and bled it into her roles, elevating each scene beyond its written page. That reputation would pave her way to the pilot episode of Family, where she would forever alter the medium's understanding of what a single take could achieve. Landing the role of Kate Lawrence was neither accidental nor inevitable. Sada negotiated fiercely for a character arc that matched her own values, refusing a one-dimensional domestic stereotype. She demanded depth, a mother grappling with her daughter's broken marriage, a woman navigating the fault lines of middle-class conformity, an actress willing to push her own emotional limits on camera. When Norman Lear's initial drafts painted Kate as complacent, Sada pressed for sharper dialogue, arguing that television had grown too cautious. She enlisted dialogue coaches to refine her lines, stripped away superfluous stage direction, and grounded every interaction in her real memories of family conflict. By the time rehearsals began in early 1975, she had charted Kate's emotional map, moments of pride, buried resentment, and the silent tremor of anxiety that would crack open at the height of the scene. On set, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation and a mild unease. Television crews were used to multiple takes, tweaking camera angles, adjusting blocking, and chasing continuity. Sada, however, insisted on preserving spontaneity. She convinced the director to capture the pivotal kitchen scene in a single, uninterrupted shot. Real pain can't be edited, she told him quietly during blocking, her voice steady even as her fingers tapped a rhythm of expectancy on the countertop. The technical team hoisted lights, aligned microphones, and rehearsed camera moves around the actors' positions. But the promise of no retakes created a hush of seriousness on the studio floor. Script supervisors hovered with annotation sheets, ready to scrawl corrections, yet they all knew this take would define the pilot's emotional core. As the cameras rolled, Sada's process was almost ritualistic. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, recalling the night her parents disowned her after she rejected a safe teaching job. She felt again the tight knot in her chest when a male professor called her plain and unsuitable for love roles. Those old pains coursed through her veins as she stepped into the fluorescent glare. When the director called action, her face hardened, and her hands began their transformation from ordinary to instruments of catharsis. The first dish she lifted shattered against the wall, shards tinkling like distant glass bells. Her voice rose, trembling at first, then gathering ferocity as she unleashed decades of suppressed anger. Silverware flew, cabinets rattled, and co-stars faltered, their scripts forgotten in the wake of her unfiltered grief. Every crew member held their breath, unsure whether to shout, "Cut," or let the moment breathe. None could tear their eyes away. For 6 minutes, time stretched and snapped. Sada embodied Kate's despair and fury so completely that the studio walls became transparent, each onlooker transported into that frangible family dinner. There were no puppet strings of artifice. It was kinetic sorrow, unedited truth, and art in its rawest form. The final moment arrived with a tremor, a fork slipping from her hand. The sound of metal skittering across linoleum seemed to echo through every heart present. Without waiting, the director called, "Cut," but the silence lingered. No one moved. The crew sat frozen behind cameras, technicians wide-eyed, lighting rigs unmanned. The resulting footage would become a masterclass in emotional economy, every shatter, every gasp, every tear a testament to what acting could be at its boldest. In the following days, word of that single take spread through industry grapevines. Editors watched the raw roll with reverence. Acting coaches pored over slow motion clips. Writers re-examined their own scripts for chances to embed similar moments of truth. ABC executives, nervous that such rawness might alienate mass audiences, reconsidered every line of dialogue. They asked Sada to tone down future scenes, but she stood firm, citing her Quaker conviction that art should reflect life's unvarnished reality. Within weeks of the pilot's preview, focus groups, usually fickle and divided, praised the scene as the most believable drama I've ever seen on television. Advertisers, initially wary, clamored for placement around the series. The network scheduled family in a prime time slot, banking on the very authenticity they had once feared. In homes across America, viewers tuned in not for escapist comedy or TV glamour, but for the crackling electricity of human truth, channeled through a single, unforgettable performance. In the months following Family's debut, Sada Thompson found herself at the center of a televised revolution. Critics fanned out in print, calling the kitchen scene television's most fearless moment, while viewers wrote letters, some praising her honesty, others decrying the raw emotion as too intense for a Sunday night. Yet Sada remained unfazed by applause or outrage. She carried forward the same steady resolve that had fueled her earliest stage fights, knowing that art's highest calling was to reflect life's unvarnished truths. When Emmy nominations were announced in 1978, Family led the pack with 17 nods. Sada was up for Outstanding Lead Actress, competing against Hollywood's biggest names. At the ceremony, she ascended the stage with quiet dignity, accepting her statuette not as a personal triumph, but as a victory for every actor who had ever performed to empty seats. She delivered a 2-minute speech that rippled through the industry, a call to honor small theaters, struggling tropes, and overlooked character actors. Her words were measured but bold. This belongs to every artist who has labored in silence, hidden by drab spotlights and empty rows. Reporters noted that 40 million viewers tuned in to hear her speak, marking it as one of television's most watched acceptance speeches. But not everyone rejoiced. Some network insiders whispered that her oration had upstaged the show's creators and rattled advertisers who preferred lighthearted fare. She was petitioned to apologize, to soften her tone in future appearances, but she would not retract a syllable. Her Quaker upbringing, rooted in integrity and social conscience, compelled her to speak unvarnished truths even when it risked her own popularity. This principled stance led to strained relationships with a handful of producers and briefly chilled offers for leading television roles. Yet those cold shoulders only reinforced her belief that authenticity was worth any professional sacrifice. Between Emmy seasons, Sada turned her attention to pay equity and ethical storytelling. During a 1982 staging of A Doll's House, she discovered that her male counterpart earned nearly 2/3 more per week. Rather than endure the injustice in silence, she called a press conference, publicly challenging Lincoln Center to close the pay gap. Variety and the New York Times splashed headlines, "Thompson confronts Center on gender pay," and "Stage icon demands fair wages." Critics praised her hawkish insistence on equity, but backstage gossip suggested some producers quietly blacklisted her for rocking the boat. Undeterred, she held firm until the women's salaries were raised, framing her stand as an extension of the same courage that had slammed dishes on a studio kitchen set. In 1985, Sada starred in an ABC movie, My Two Loves, portraying a mother grappling with her daughter's lesbian relationship. A bold storyline for prime-time television. When the episode aired, televangelist Jerry Falwell condemned it as immoral, and the network received over 500 hate letters in the first week. Sada collected each missive, later mailing them back with handwritten notes that read, "Love deserves its own story." Though the backlash was fierce, the telefilm drew critical acclaim and opened doors for honest LGBTQ narratives. Sada's unwavering support for marginalized voices became another cornerstone of her legacy, as she lent her name to early AIDS charity fundraisers and penned essays on inclusion in industry journals. Despite the growing weight of her public persona, Sada never let accolades eclipse her craft. She returned to the stage in 1989 for Andre's Mother, a teleplay on PBS about a mother coming to terms with her son's death from AIDS. Budget cuts forced the production to shoot in a single location with minimal crew, but Sada's performance transcended constraints. Her icy stillness and barely quivered expression conveyed layers of grief that reviews called haunting and inescapable. Industry insiders regarded her turn as a masterclass. How to use silence, posture, and a single glare to speak volumes. Andre's Mother won a Peabody Award, validating her belief that bold stories, regardless of scale, could resonate more deeply than glossier productions. By the early 1990s, Sada's career had spanned half a century, yet she refused to rest on her laurels. When invited to play Judge Edgar Haynes in Law and Order's Jeopardy! Episode, she chose a corrupt, morally ambiguous character, shattering audience preconceptions. Longtime fans were stunned to see her deliver bribes and throw out pivotal evidence. The industry hailed her versatility, and the episode ranked among the series' highest-rated installments of that season. For Sada, the role was a reminder that reinvention was vital, that an actor must continually risk audience loyalty to explore the full spectrum of human complexity. Throughout these milestone roles, the memory of that one uninterrupted take on family remained a guiding beacon. Acting coaches dissected the 6-minute sequence at workshops worldwide, analyzing eye tracking, vocal modulation, and the power of unbroken focus. Film schools intercut her dish, slam with classroom lectures on method acting's potential hazards, cautioning students not to blur the line between self and character. Sada, ever the pragmatist, advised young actors to anchor their emotions in craft and community, reminding them that no scene, however transformative, was worth sacrificing one's mental health. As the 1990s gave way to the new millennium, her legend endured. Viral clips of the family scene resurfaced online, sparking fresh debates about authenticity in media. Gen Z viewers, previously unfamiliar with Sada's name, were captivated by the rawness of her performance, marveling at the courage it took to shatter studio conventions.